On what seemed like an ordinary day, a misdelivered file turned my entire life in a direction no one could have anticipated. Within just a few hours, I discovered that my name had been used to take out a loan of nearly $500,000 to purchase a house I had never even set foot in. But the biggest shock didn't come from the enormous figure on the documents, it came from the three people I loved most in the world. My parents and younger sister, the ones I always believed would stand by me, turned out to be the very ones who pushed me off the edge, all under the guise of one-word family. This isn't just a simple story about finances or a property dispute. This is a journey of peeling back the sweet veneer of familial bonds to uncover the raw truth beneath. And sometimes that truth doesn't just hurt, it forces you to choose between holding on to what was once familiar or standing up for yourself. I am Natalie Brooks, the eldest daughter of a middle-class family in Fairfield, Connecticut, a place where the weeping willows drape over quiet streets as if hiding the stories no one dares to speak aloud. From an early age, I learned that in our home, love was not always distributed evenly, and success wasn't something to be proud of unless it aligned with my parents' unspoken expectations. My younger sister Sophie, 4 years my junior, was the living embodiment of indulgence. If I brought home an A+, my mother would smile and ask why it wasn't a perfect score. But if Sophie barely passed with a C, the whole family would celebrate as if she'd earned an honorary degree. Every reward, every ounce of attention, even forgiveness, was readily available for her, while I lived under the weight of silent expectations and relentless scrutiny. I remember my 16th birthday, a rusty old bicycle still caked with mud on the back tire left quietly on the porch. Sophie. She got a brand new bright red car with a golden bow the moment she learned to drive. I started working at a coffee shop at 16 just to afford my textbooks, while Sophie didn't have to worry about anything except experiencing her youth. In college, I hunted down partial scholarships to Boston University, took out student loans for the rest, and worked 20 hours a week at the library just to cover rent and food. My parents said they couldn't support me because they were saving for Sophie's future, and I believed them. I wasn't sad then. I was proud of being strong, of not needing anyone. But now looking back, I realize that was the first time they trained me to become comfortable with being systematically abandoned. While I was exhausting myself building a life in Boston, Sophie dropped out of 3 different colleges over 5 years, never once earning a degree. Yet my parents spared no expense for her full tuition, a furnished apartment, and unlimited allowance. While I was calculating every penny to pay off student loans, Sophie was posting beach photos from Cancun, fully funded by a little gift from mom and dad. I didn't feel jealous. At least I thought I didn't. But the truth is, when you grow up in a family where fairness is just a concept taught but never practiced, self-respect slowly turns into endurance, and endurance eventually begins to crack. I never imagined that success could become the very excuse others would use to accuse me. When I turned 30, my life had finally begun to stabilize, after years of scraping by to pay off student loans. I was renting a small apartment in Boston's South End, paying my own insurance, contributing to a retirement fund, and maintaining an emergency savings account for the unexpected. I wasn't wealthy, but I was secure. I knew how to live below my means, how to plan, and how to stick to that plan. And yet, to my parents, none of this was seen as effort or independence. It was simply labeled with one phrase: "You're well off." Sophie was different. After dropping out of school multiple times, she bounced from one job to another: restaurant server, receptionist, none of them lasting more than a few months. At 27, she was still living in our parents' basement, not paying a single cent in rent. When she decided to move out, they didn't just co-sign her lease, they paid the deposit and bought her furniture to make her transition easier. No one ever asked what I ate on my first day living alone. I just remember there was a week I survived on bread and tap water. But Sophie was always cared for in every tiny detail, as if the world owed her an easy ride. Then at some point I started noticing something odd in my mother's phone calls. Whenever Sophie ran into trouble, a broken-down car credit card debt, a last-minute vacation she couldn't afford, my mother would call me. "You're so good with money, Natalie," she would say in a soft voice as if it were nothing serious. "Your sister's really stressed out right now. Could you just help her this one time?" Once I transferred a few $100s thinking I was helping my sister through a rough patch, but that one time quickly turned into an unspoken expectation. No one ever explicitly said I was responsible for Sophie, but my mother's look, my father's tone, and Sophie's silence all conveyed one clear message. If you're successful, then it's your job to carry your sister's burdens. I started going quiet at family dinners. Every time I mentioned work or an accomplishment, the conversation would immediately pivot to Sophie struggling to pay rent or being stressed about her debt. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, they would be proud of me. But now I understand, to them, my stability wasn't something to celebrate. It was a spare wallet they felt entitled to open whenever they pleased. One April afternoon, as the soft sunlight fell over the stone steps leading into my apartment in Boston, I walked in after work like any other day and found a thick envelope among the usual pile of mail. The embossed logo of Beacon Home Mortgage made my heart skip a beat. I had never applied for a home loan, nor had I any intention of buying property at that time. Assuming it was marketing material or sent to the wrong address, I nearly tossed it straight into the trash. But something instinct or some vague unease made me open it, and from that moment on my world began to splinter piece by piece. Inside was a detailed copy of a $480,000 mortgage application for a house on Willow Lane, Lexington, a quiet residential area about a 20-minute drive from Boston. My name was printed in bold on the very first page under the borrower section. The documents outlined the loan amount, a fixed 30-year interest rate, and monthly payments of nearly $3,000. I felt like I had been pulled out of reality, my mind spinning, stomach-churning, hands trembling as I turned each page. It wasn't just my name, it was also my signature. Or at least a very convincing replica of it. That same rounded script, the familiar underline beneath my name, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed a single document related to that house. I tried calling the bank immediately, but business hours had already ended. I left an urgent message about suspected fraud and identity theft, then sat frozen in my kitchen staring at the stack of documents on the table, as if staring long enough would make them disappear. I couldn't sleep all night. My head raced with questions. Who had done this? Why me? And the worst of all, how did they get my personal information and signature? I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, a mix-up, some scam by a stranger. But deep down, I began to feel afraid. Not of some criminal out there, but of the gnawing sense that the answer might be much closer. Somewhere within my own family. The next morning, before I had a chance to call Beacon back, my mother called me first. Her voice was as gentle as if she were asking whether I had received a birthday card, not a thick packet of mortgage documents with my name on them. "You got the paperwork right?" she asked, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I had misheard her or if she was deliberately pretending this wasn't something serious. I kept my voice as calm as I could manage, but the question slipped out faster than I could think. "Are you talking about the mortgage documents for the house on Willow Lane? Why is my name on them? What is going on?" She only sighed and said, "This is a family matter. Come home tonight. Your father and Sophie will be there too." I wanted to refuse to press her for answers right then, but her firm tone made it clear that the truth would only come out that fateful evening. I took the day off from work, caught in a fog of anger and anxiety, and drove the 3 hours back to my childhood home in Fairfield. When I walked in, all three of them, my father, mother, and Sophie, were already seated in the living room, the air so cold it felt like I had stepped into an unspoken trial. My mother poured me a glass of wine without asking, and my father pointed to the chair opposite them as if he were leading a business meeting, not a family gathering. I sat down, placing the untouched wine to the side. "We need to have a serious conversation," my father began. "About the house." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd like to talk about that too." "Why is my name on the mortgage file?" My mother spoke first. "Sophie's been living in an overpriced rental in Cambridge. We thought it was time she had a stable home." I clenched my fists. "Fine. But what does that have to do with me?" My father sat upright. "We found a suitable house in Lexington, but with Sophie's credit history and unstable job situation, she couldn't qualify for the loan. So—" He paused as if waiting for me to finish the sentence, but I had already understood they had used my information to take out that loan. The truth shattered like glass hitting the floor. "You mean you used my personal information and signature to get a mortgage for her?" I nearly shouted. My mother placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder in a reflexive, protective gesture. "You're doing well. You can handle this. It's for the family." But for the first time in my life, I no longer saw family as a place of belonging. It had become a place where I was being legally betrayed. I rose from the worn-out chair where I had just been informed that my life had been decided for me by the very people who brought me into this world, my chest tight with fury and disbelief. My voice trembled but came out clear. "I never agreed to any of this. This is forgery. It's fraud." My father frowned, his eyes cold as steel. "Don't use such harsh words, Natalie. This is a private family matter." My mother, meanwhile, spoke with the calmness of someone who believed I was the one causing trouble. "We're blood. You've succeeded, your sister hasn't. Helping each other is only natural." But their version of natural meant forging my name using my social security number and saddling me with nearly $500,000 in debt without ever asking me once. I turned to Sophie, who had remained silent the entire time, her eyes dry and unapologetic. "You're always talking about investments, about how much you make. One more loan shouldn't be a big deal for you," she said flatly, as if I should feel ashamed for having managed my life well. I choked up, not from anger, but from heartbreak. All those years I worked quietly and diligently, thinking that if I was just good enough, one day my family would finally see me, only to realize I had become nothing more than their premium backup wallet. "I'm not paying a single cent for that house." I said, each word cutting through the fragile facade of what they called family. "And tomorrow I'm calling the police to report identity theft and fraud." My mother shot up, grabbing my wrist as if to squeeze out one last bit of hope. "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back." I pulled my hand free and looked her straight in the eye. If staying means being exploited, then maybe I shouldn't come back. I left that house in silence, the night wind whipping through my hair like lashes across my face. Inside me wasn't just anger, but a fracture that wouldn't heal. I lost something that night: trust, hope, and the innocence of believing that family would naturally protect you. But I also found something else: a boundary. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself, instead of being the obedient daughter they expected. The next morning, I sat on the sofa by the window, my hand still clutching a cold cup of coffee, my heart hollow in a way that felt terrifying. Everything inside me seemed to be in free fall, weightless. Family. The thing I once believed was where I belonged had now become the subject of a criminal case file. In that chaos, I called Jessica Tran, my friend from college, now a paralegal at a law firm specializing in financial crimes. I told her everything from the mortgage documents to that dramatic night, my voice breaking at parts I thought I had already made peace with. "Nat, this is serious," Jessica said after a pause. "This isn't just a family dispute. This is signature forgery and identity theft. It's a federal crime." Her words hit me like a brick. Deep down, I knew she was right. But at the same time, they were still my parents. The ones who took me to ballet lessons, the ones who bought me my first watch when I graduated high school. I had never imagined putting them before the law. Jessica connected me with Rachel Goldstein, a sharp and seasoned attorney who agreed to a free initial consultation. She met with me in her office, her voice firm and her gaze unwavering, making it clear The first step is to legally separate yourself from the loan. Then we build the evidence. And finally, if we have to, we take it to court. I nodded. Despite the pain, I knew there was no turning back. Over the next week, I gathered every piece of evidence: emails, messages, copies of the documents with the forged signature, even recordings of conversations with my parents. Rachel helped me draft a formal letter sent by certified mail, a clear and unequivocal refusal. I was not responsible. I did not consent to any obligations tied to that house, and I was fully aware that they had committed a crime. 3 days after the letter was delivered by hand, my father called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail nearly 2 minutes long, his voice trembling with fury and grief. "That's enough, Natalie. Your mother is falling apart. Sophie's been crying for a week. You think you're smart, but you're tearing this family apart. Call back if you have even a shred of responsibility left for your loved ones." I didn't call back. Instead, I followed Rachel's advice. To the letter, I sent formal notifications to the bank and the county land office, including a sworn affidavit stating that the signature was forged. That was the moment I knew this battle was no longer about family. It was a fight to protect myself. Everything began escalating in ways no one had anticipated, though I was no longer naive enough to believe they would back down easily. After I submitted formal complaints to Beacon Home Mortgage and the Department of Local Resources, the phone calls from my parents became relentless and uncontrollable. They used unfamiliar numbers to avoid being blocked, leaving voicemails with tones that swung between rage and pleading. My mother showed up at the lobby of my office building clutching a gift bag, as if she were just stopping by for a visit, only to burst into tears and accuse me in front of the receptionist. Security had to escort her out. A few days later, my boss received an email from my father accusing me of showing signs of emotional instability and paranoia, claiming I was slandering the family and might require medical attention. Thankfully, my boss understood the situation and didn't let the accusations affect their evaluation of my work. I thought I had reached rock bottom, but then Sophie launched a campaign of her own on social media. She posted tearful videos claiming that I, the wealthy, cold-hearted sister, was making her lose her home out of jealousy and spite. Edited text messages and selectively chosen images were used to craft a narrative of a cruel sister abandoning her family for money, which quickly spread on Facebook and TikTok. I saw my name appear on a GoFundMe page titled "Abandoned by My Sister in My Time of Need," with thousands of dollars donated by strangers, all based on a completely fabricated story. Even relatives I hadn't spoken to in over a decade messaged me with condemnation, saying things like, "Family is forever," and "Don't let money blind you to love." I received only one message that brought me to tears, not out of pain, but because I felt seen. A message from my grandmother, Ruth. "My dear Natalie, I don't know the whole story, but if you need someone to listen, I'm here." That simple sentence felt like a lifeline in the middle of a chaotic ocean. Beyond that, I was left to swim alone. Beacon informed me that an internal investigation was underway, but they could not confirm whether criminal charges would be pursued. My life hung in suspension, not just financially, but emotionally. I stopped attending yoga classes, canceled a planned vacation, and ceased contributions to my retirement fund. Every morning, I woke up with an invisible weight pressing on my chest and a single question echoing through my mind: how much longer can I endure this? One early summer morning, just as I was getting ready to leave for work, there came a knock at the door. 3 short, firm taps unannounced. When I opened it, a man in a light brown suit stood there holding a thick folder, his expression unreadable. "Are you Natalie Brooks?" I nodded, my chest tightening. "I've been authorized to serve you with legal documents. You are officially being sued by Martin and Elaine Brooks regarding the debt related to the property at Willow Lane." I shut the door without even remembering if I had signed anything. All I could hear was a roaring in my ears like the ocean just before a storm. They had actually done it. My parents, the people who raised me, whom I had tried to please throughout my childhood and early adult years, had officially dragged me into court, suing me for not paying off a debt they themselves created by forging my identity. In the lawsuit, they claimed I had verbally agreed to buy a house for my sister, that they were merely acting on my behalf out of goodwill and in the best interest of the family. Part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer audacity of it, but the rest of me went cold with the realization that regardless of the lack of legal basis, I was still facing a very real legal battle, costly, prolonged, and full of risk. I immediately called Rachel, who quickly reassured me, "They have no legal grounds, but we still need to file a formal response within 21 days to avoid a default judgment." She connected me with Marcus Bennett, a lawyer who specialized in intra-family financial disputes. The retainer fee was $10,000, nearly my entire emergency fund built up over the years. When we met, Marcus was blunt: "Legally, this case is in your favor. But strategically, they're trying to wear you down with time and emotional pressure to force a settlement." His words struck a nerve. He was right, this wasn't about justice anymore. It was a war of attrition, a drawn-out battle where the loser would be the one who collapsed first. We immediately filed a response denying all allegations and submitting a counterclaim: harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and public defamation. A motion to dismiss the case was also filed. Judge Reeves scheduled a hearing for 3 months later. I knew this was only the prelude, but I also knew this time I wasn't alone. I had legal counsel. I had the truth. And I had myself. The 3 months leading up to the hearing passed like an endless waking nightmare. Each day was a mental battle against myself: how to keep working, how to smile when coworkers asked how I was doing, how to get out of bed in the morning when my body felt like it was sinking into an invisible abyss. I lost weight. Rapidly, clumps of my hair fell out in the shower, and nighttime panic attacks left me lying flat on the kitchen floor more than once, whispering to myself that I was still breathing, that I hadn't drowned completely. My savings account slowly drained from legal fees and the days I had to take off work to meet with Marcus. I slashed every unnecessary expense, stopped contributing to my 401k, canceled all vacations, even used my credit card to buy groceries. And worst of all, there were still people around me who believed I was overreacting. "Well, they're still your parents," a coworker said absent-mindedly when she heard me sigh during a break. I didn't blame her. She had no idea what happened behind the doors of my family home. Even the therapist I had tried seeing a few times gently suggested that I consider the cost of winning versus preserving the family relationship. I never went back. I didn't need another person telling me that endurance was noble, that forgiveness meant sacrifice. I had sacrificed enough. This time, I chose to stand with myself. Then one day, Marcus handed me a legal document, a settlement offer. My family, through their attorney, proposed that if I agreed to pay off the mortgage over 5 years, they would drop the lawsuit. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing. Just a cold pay, and we'll walk away. I sat in Marcus's office staring at the papers like they were a trap, skillfully disguised in legal language. 5 years meant 60 months, 60 payments, 60 times being gutted financially and emotionally. And in return, I'd receive nothing but the hollow silence of a relationship already rotted to the core. I picked up the pen and signed the line rejecting the settlement. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I couldn't go on living as if none of it had happened. Acceptance would have been a form of complicity, and I had lost too much to be complicit in injustice one more time. Marcus looked at me, his eyes no longer just those of a lawyer, but of someone who truly understood. "I'll inform them. And Natalie, you just did the right thing." I nodded, knowing that while the road ahead was still long, at least this time I was walking it for myself. The hearing took place on a gray Monday morning, the sky mirroring exactly what I felt inside: quiet, heavy, and filled with nervous anticipation. I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in a navy suit I reserved for only the most important occasions, holding a thick folder I had memorized cover to cover. Marcus met me at the courthouse steps, his gaze resolute, his voice steady and warm. "You're more prepared than any client I've ever had. Let me handle the legal part. The truth, it will speak for itself." Inside the courtroom, my parents and Sophie sat across from me, their faces trying to appear calm, but their eyes betraying the tension. My mother clutched Sophie's hand as if clinging to the last shred of belief that what they'd done was for their daughter. Judge Caroline Reeves opened the hearing with a voice that was sharp, yet composed. As Marcus presented the arguments about the invalidity of the lawsuit, the laws against oral agreements in real estate transactions, and the documented evidence of identity fraud, I kept my eyes forward and my spine straight as stone. But when Marcus introduced text messages uncovered during discovery, words my parents had written to each other like, "Don't ask her, just do it. She won't abandon her sister," my heart clenched. Not from pain, but from the undeniable confirmation this had never been a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate scheme, and I had been the unwilling sacrifice. When it was my turn to stand, my hands no longer trembled. I spoke about teaching myself, surviving on my own, pushing through emotional and financial neglect throughout my youth. I didn't blame. I didn't cry. I simply spoke the truth in a steady, firm voice, like someone who had finally learned that kindness should not be exploited. Walking out of that courtroom, I didn't yet know what the verdict would be. But I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer Natalie, who bent over backward for love. I was a woman who had learned how to draw boundaries and protect herself, even if it meant facing off against the people she once called family. 9 days later, Marcus called me in the middle of a meeting. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and heard him say just one sentence. "The court dismissed the case. They're ordered to pay you $15,000 in legal fees." I leaned against the wall, tears streaming down, not from defeat, but because for the first time in my life, I felt like I had won. Truly won. I once believed that losing your family meant losing everything. But in the end, I realized some relationships are not homes to return to, but doors you must walk out of to truly begin living. My decision to defend my boundaries wasn't just a legal action, it was a declaration: I will no longer stay silent in the face of injustice, even if it comes from those I once loved most. I may have lost a house, but I found a version of myself stronger than any shelter could ever be. If you are in a situation where your kindness is being taken advantage of in the name of family, remember that you are not alone. Feel free to share your story below if you'd like, and don't forget to follow this channel to hear more courageous journeys like this. Protecting your finances and your inner peace is not selfish, it is a mature and deeply human form of self-love. Thank you for listening.